Hello, everyone. The Tonebenders London Sound Design Meetup is approaching fast, so listeners in the UK, mark it down for Sunday, August 24th at 7 p.m. in Soho at the Crown and Two Chairmen pub. Come on out and have a great evening with the sound community in London. We are also in the final days to participate in our Listener Field Recording Stories episode. Send in the tale of your favorite recording, and you could win a pair of O-Mini microphones. You have until August 15th to submit. We have some fun stories already, but there is always room for more. Full details for both the London Sound Design Meetup and how to participate in the Listener Field Recording Stories can be found at tonebenderspodcast.com. I will also be attending and covering the Toronto International Film Festival in early September. If you worked on a film that will be at the festival, let me know and I will do my best to check it out. This episode you're about to hear is a really fun format, and I hope I get to do it more often. Getting the sound teams from two totally different projects and having them kind of bounce ideas and workflows off of each other is really fun and inspiring. Let me know if you like it too. Okay, here we go. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. Sound Ideas' highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiances. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Ideas proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Hello, my name is Tim Muirhead, and I am excited for this talk today. I've wrangled the sound teams behind two really spectacular shows to have a conversation about what it's like to work on top-level prestige television series. In this case, both of them for HBO. The Penguins stormed into our living rooms last fall as a follow-up to the hit film by Matt Reeves, The Batman. Colin Farrell reprises his role as the Penguin in the aftermath of Gotham being flooded and the city's organized crime hierarchy in tatters. We're lucky to have Rich Bologna, co-supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer, and Kris, the re-recording mixer on The Penguin, to talk to us today about their work on the series.
Hal's an addict, sweetheart. He's got a penchant for drops. And booze, and gambling, and I'm pretty sure he's got a sex thing too, so yeah, this ain't the first time he's gone AWOL, but he always comes back. And look, if he was at my club, I wouldn't know. I was actually drowning my sorrows with my lady friend last night, Eve. But if it make you feel better, let's you and me go there right now. Come on, we'll scour the joint. I doubt anything will turn up, but it's worth a shot. You know, whatever puts your mind at ease.
Rich was last on Tonebenders in March 2021, talking about his work on Judas and the Black Messiah back in episode 161. It's great to have you back, Rich. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Kris was previously on Tonebenders in 2023 for a fantastic episode about the all-time classic series Succession, which he was an integral part of. Andy, wonderful to see you again.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
The Last of Us premiered its season 2 over this past winter and spring, and it was a doozy, living up to the expectations set by season 1 and amazingly even surpassing them. The episode called Through the Valley is one of the most massive undertakings in a series I've seen in a very long time. Joining us today from the Last of Us sound team is Michael Benavente, the supervising sound editor, and Sam Ejnes, the re-recording mixer. Michael was on Tonebenders back when season 1 was airing for a lively talk in episode 220. Welcome back, Michael.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
And finally, we have a first-time guest on Tonebenders, someone I've wanted to have on the show for a long time, the Last of Us re-recording mixer. Sam, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get going, I want to send out a massive congrats to all of you for your Emmy nominations. The Penguin is nominated in both sound editing and mixing in the limited series category, while The Last of Us has been recognized in both sound editing and mixing in the 1 hour drama or comedy category. So we can all be friends today because you're not up against each other. So we can all be civil. The first question I want to ask is, both of these series kind of take place on Earth, but in a different reality. How does sound play a role in world building and making these surroundings feel real? Rich, why don't you take that first?
The thing with the Penguin that was kind of our big challenge, but also the fun of it was, we're taking off from where the Batman franchise left off in a way. A big part of the job, I think, was honoring that film, but also trying to carve out a new direction for the series. Luckily, we came into the job. I'm actually pretty good old friends with Will Files, who did the film. And that's actually how I think I got on the gig, is Will and I work with Craig Zobel a lot, who's the director of this first episode. The challenge for us was to kind of honor the film, but also to try to figure out what makes the Penguin unique. And I think the beauty of the show is that from Oz's perspective, the film is kind of obviously from the Batman's perspective, which is kind of a wide-eyed view of Gotham. And Oz operates kind of on the street level, which is a whole other vibe for sound, obviously, but also just the entire show. I think that was really the fun for all of us. Lauren, the showrunner included, was very adamant about differentiating the show because we're just on the streets of Gotham, which is a whole other universe. So I think for us, that challenge was essentially making it a very kind of gritty, almost mobster genre type of a show rather than a superhero show. The big marching order from Lauren across the board was just to kind of keep things very based in reality, very gritty. I think that was kind of our palette to start from. I don't know if Andy, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge to make Gotham be New York, but not New York. I think that was kind of one of our big challenges in this. And to have it be, that kind of realistic thing that Lauren wanted, which is like, what is Gotham realistically? Like, we don't really know. I mean, we had the palette of the movie to sort of base what we were doing on. But again, it's kind of like a whole different subset of the world of Gotham that we were in with Oz and his world and the places that he went to. So, even though we took our lead from the film, we actually then got to create some different environments that were unique to just the Penguin and the world that Oz inhabits.
I mean, on the first episode, it was kind of a little stressful for us because obviously the film has a much bigger kind of timeline to work from, and there's high expectations, and obviously there's big boots to fill with that sound job because we all really loved the movie. And there were literally times where we were on the stage, I would kind of pull up the film just to hear what kind of siren they used, just to essentially pay lip service to the film. But luckily, we didn't have to go back to Will and get kits or anything like that because it was, I think, unique enough of a premise to kind of do our own thing with, which was fun. But I think just the overall pathos of the movie, I think, was very much always in the back of our minds,
Michael, let's talk about The Last of Us for a similar question. World building in a world where there's no planes flying overhead, there's very few vehicles. Do you want to talk about finding the voice that way?
Sure. The similarities between season 1 and season 2 basically are that, half the population, or probably greater, is gone now. So you don't have school bells or sirens or hospital PAs. It's a very quiet show in many, many spots. Everything is kind of naked out there. Every footstep, every raindrop. The difference between season 1 and season 2 was season 1, we were on this journey. We were going from city to city, and each city obviously had to sound slightly different. But season 2, it seemed like once we got out of Jackson, Wyoming, we're in a different location for every scene. And Craig Mazin, the showrunner, is very demanding that he wants them all to sound different. And, you only have so many airs and so many raindrops. But somehow we were able to make them all sound a little bit different. I attribute a lot of it to Sam and Mark Fishman, our dialogue mixer. They were able to take what we did, the editors, and just make everything sound beautiful and unique. And if it didn't sound beautiful and unique, then Craig would, let's start over. voiceover, but we didn't have too much of that in season 2. So the challenges from season 1 were basically that it's a generally quiet show, except for the big action sequences. Uniquely in season 2, we had to come up with a new soundscape probably like every 10 minutes.
Wow. Sam, did you want to add to that?
What really stands out about the show for me is just the amount of quiet there is. And then, of course, the amount of absolute bonkers action. And just that dynamic that exists in the show it's one of the coolest things about it for me, and also one of the hardest things, because as Michael says, everything is right out there. So we can't not have the right sound of a footstep, the right sound of a prop. Like, we need to have everything dialed in, because in some cases, there's so much happening or so much to take in. We are guiding the viewer with the sound of like what to focus on. So having that level of detail was really important, and is like the Craig's like number one marching order, is that it has to sound right.
Even the guitar tuning, we had to go in and record the strings playing exactly as they went. You know, Pedro's guitar and Ellie's guitar had to sound accurate. In season 1, we had a piano where a frog jumps on a piano, and those notes weren't quite right at first, and we had to re-record them just to get the music department didn't take care of that. We did get those notes correct, because he's got an ear like that, and it felt good to make it authentic.
Rich, we'll start with you again on this one. First of all, I guess with Penguin, are you working episode to episode, or is everything coming at you in waves? And then when you do get an episode, how do you tackle it? What are your thoughts? How do you figure out dividing the workload and such like that as supervising sound editor?
The dirty secret on the Penguin is that I think we only spotted officially one episode of that show. It was a little bit nerve-wracking until we started mixing, because we were just sort of flying a little bit blind. I knew from the one spotting session we had sort of the vibe that Lauren was after, but it was essentially for the first 3 episodes, I was not mixing, I think. And then once episode 4 came in, I kind of switched over to mixing mode. So luckily I had my co-pilot, who's an amazing sound designer in his own right. Larry Ziff was my co-supervisor. He was essentially in tandem with me cutting, and I think for the first couple of episodes, just because we wanted to all be on the same page, he was spending a lot of time on the stage. So there was sort of layers of delegation happening. I mean, the time constraints on the show were intense. It was pretty crunchy. So I look back kind of with a little bit of awe, because it feels like the team, I mean, credit to our whole sound team, because I feel like if there was one loose cog in that wheel, it would have all come off the tracks. So it was really invigorating and exciting, because everybody was really operating at a high level. And once we actually got into a flow of the show, it was like, okay, we got this. And, music was a big part of trying to figure things out. So we're kind of building a plane in the air a little bit for a while. And then once we started rolling, we found a groove. I think editorially, I was very much involved for the beginning, and then we kind of switched into mixing mode, and I was still supervising with Larry from afar, just getting, eyes on episodes as they were rolling in. But he kind of took the baton once we started really mixing properly.
And who was on the sound team for it?
As I said, Larry and I were co-supervisors. We had Angela Organ, who's an amazing ADR supervisor, Michael McMenemy, who's a really great dialogue editor, and also giving Michael some props. He is an avid field recordist. So a lot of the actual custom stuff we used in the show, just the New York City-centric stuff, like trains and atmospheres and stuff, were recorded by him. He kind of doubled as that duty. We had a great Foley crew in London led by Julian, and I think I'll butcher his last name, Peary. Who else? We got Andy on the dialogue and music side, and Phil Menard was our assistant. I'm probably missing somebody, but that's the broad strokes of the crew.
You get the disadvantage of going first. I can see the Last of Us team madly Googling IMDb there, making sure they got everybody's names.
Frantically IMDbing, yeah.
Right.
I should say we had 2 really great effects editors that came in. Diego Perez and Wyatt Sprague were on the effects side. Oh, I should give Kris Gebert a shout out. He's actually a friend of mine who did production sound, and he gave us great tracks.
It's interesting because obviously these shows, they're big. There's lots going on. So it's not a one or two person crew, obviously. So it's cool to hear the village that goes into these types of shows. Michael, do you want to talk about how you tackle a giant episode?
Well, we did spot all 7 episodes. Craig Mason's pretty adamant about that, but they get, we high speed through. He trusts us that we know what to do and how to cover things. But I love spotting because there are things that I don't think of sometimes that I'm not even aware that's what the picture department and Craig are thinking of. And, I take pretty good notes and send them off to my crew once I spot with him. And then Timothy Good, who is the head picture editor and now promoted to co-producer, which he totally deserves. He and his crew make really great soundtracks in the Avid. So good that I actually brought 2 sound editors on before I even started for season 2, just to feed the Avid. They would work 2 or 3 days a week, Jimmy Miller and Chris Terhune, and they sort of fed them things. And we had those, and we tried to, obviously use as much of that material if it worked, and it generally did for the final as well. We always try to, at least both seasons now, we've tried to start small, but that goes out the window quickly, much to HBO's chagrin, because, the shows get big and they start overlapping. We have so many visual effects in our show that, a certain sequence isn't done or an episode isn't done, and we have to move on to the next episode because we're waiting to see, how those flamethrowers or those creatures are going to end up looking or what they're actually going to do. My sound effects supervisor was Chris Battaglia. Chris Terhune was our other sound designer. Then on effects, we had Jacob Flack, Mitch Lesner, Oda Benitez.
It was a big, wide crew. And then... Yeah, so it was awesome having that stuff from Jimmy and Chris from the Avid, because then when everyone got to stage, it wasn't fresh. It was something that they knew and they were familiar with, and we could build off of that.
We kind of learned that the hard way on season 1 because we obviously we always refer to the Avid and listen to it, but we didn't use it as much the first few episodes of season 1. Then we realized it was really important to Tim and the other picture editors to really use that as a template. And quite frankly, it really helped us. That thing is quieter. That thing is louder. We don't want to hear that thing. Joe Schiff is my dialogue editor. And then we used the fabulous Randy Wilson up in Toronto for Foley. Kind of created a monster with Randy because we used to be one of the only ones who used him, and now I can't get him hardly because he's so popular. But they do really, really great work. Randy's great because Craig, those 3 footsteps have to have glass now. I want to change that. So I literally call him up, redo those 3 or 4 footsteps for me, and he'll set them down in 10 minutes, and stuff. So
wow. Sam, let's talk about it from the re-recording mixer point of view. A lot of TV shows don't get the luxury of having a 2-man team. But these shows, they're huge. They have that luxury. Do you want to talk about what the day is like working on a 2-man team on a prestige show like this? We'll pass it to Andy afterwards. But Sam, if you want to start, how's the day begin?
It's definitely essential having the 2-man on a show of this size because there's just so much material, we'd never be able to get through it. Mark and I work really well kind of in tandem.
Do you want to give Mark's last name? I don't think we said his last name.
So Mark Fishman is my partner in crime in this endeavor. He handles the music, dialogue, group, and he kills it. He also gets some fantastic tracks to work with, and Michael and his team do an awesome job preparing things for us. With all of that prep work, once it hits the stage, it's in really good shape so that we're not kind of running around trying to fix any problems that were kind of left over. We're able to take the material and just dive right into it and start working it and building things out a little bit more. So Mark and I generally will work separately, but on the same speakers, which really freaks people out sometimes if they're not familiar with the workflow, because they'll see one scene on the screen and hear another scene's effects from 20 minutes down the line. They're like, there shouldn't be a door here. It's like, don't worry about it. It's fine. It helps us to be able to work separately. And in moments where there are very detailed things that we need to work out, or if one of us is working on something really loud, like he has a giant score cue, I have a giant 20-minute battle. One of us will go onto headphones just to sort of pre-dub, get things worked out, and then come together and do a couple of scenes at a time to just sort of figure out where we're at, make any adjustments as needed once we link back up together, and then kind of split apart, work on a few more scenes or sequences, and then rinse, repeat all the way through.
Andy?
So, this was kind of a unique thing where Rich and I were the mix team, but Rich had been on for a couple weeks before I started mixing with him. Normally in a lot of projects that I've worked on, I have a relationship with either the showrunner or an editor or somebody or the studio. In this case, I have a big, long relationship with HBO, but I've never worked with Lauren before, never worked on, like a DC property for HBO. So this was kind of like a whole unique situation where we had no idea what we were getting into. What I normally do in most shows is just, I'll take the dialogue edit from the dialogue editor, take a day-ish to, go through the tracks and clean up whatever I think is necessary to clean up, get some basic levels, bring in all the ADR, talk to the music editor, because I mix the dialogue and the music on this show. Get the music tracks from the music editor, which were still in a state of flux because those were always being revised and incoming. And then actually, I think almost every cue was thrown out and recreated, at the end of the day. That first day that Rich and I were on the stage together, it was like, so what do we do? And he's like, I have a rough idea, but let's just start putting the show together. And in a couple days, Lauren, the showrunner, was going to show up and play it for her, and we'll see where we're at. We mixed for a couple days doing that, just trying to get the show where we thought it should be. And then when she came in, like Rich said, it was like time to build the plane in the air, because some of it was new to her. Some of it was like, I'd like to do this in this scene and I'd like to play around. So this show was so unique that like normally I have a really good idea on like what, we need to do from day one to the final playback. This show, we had no idea. So we were kind of left like, doing a lot of revisions on the stage. Rich was doing editorial. If Rich was trying to design something in like a scene because it was a completely brand new idea, I would go under headphones and maybe try to make some ADR work. We were also throwing a bunch of ADR that was supposedly for an accent. Somebody was keeping track of this official Gotham accent that nobody really knew what it was supposed to be, and there really isn't one. So I had to wrangle tons and tons of ADR that may or may not be in the show. It was a lot of situations where you're like, God, I hope I'm never in that situation one day. And like all those situations were in place for this mix. So
I have a question. Did Colin have a lot of accent?
he did, but not because there was an Irish accent, because his Oz accent wasn't the Gotham accent. There was one day on the very last day of the mix where we needed some fight efforts from Colin, and he had done a big wild pass in ADR to record a bunch of grunts and efforts and stuff. And we're playing through that whole track. Lauren was saying, I like that, like that, like that. And we get to the end, and Colin, in his full-on Irish accent says, I think, you got what you need. I'm not going to do an Irish accent because that would be terrible. And it was the first time I had ever connected Colin's voice to the character of Oz. And it was
I'll bet.
Totally mind-blowing.
Well, with Bella Ramsey in our show is the same thing. I mean, she's such a terrific actress and does an amazing American voice. But every now and then we had a dialect coach and everything slips in. And it seemed like most of our ADR was just trying to get that little bit of less, English accent out. And half the time we ended up going with what they shot in production because the performances were so good and it was so slight because she was so good. But we did deal with a lot of accent stuff as well.
I hadn't worked mixed with Andy in a couple of years, and it was really fun for me to get back into it because I do probably a little bit more feature work than TV, but working with Andy is always kind of thrilling because it's like the thing that I kind of learned from Andy is that the dude is always punching, always be punching. You don't have time on a TV show to kind of really get in the weeds and do EQ. So it's like, I'll look over and we'll be playing back and the guy will just be EQing on the fly and punching in. So, and that's how his tracks sound so good. It's like he's never not taking an opportunity to record, because he'll always be finding a little thing that he wants to make better. And so I really enjoyed that process because it's like, wow, it's amazing how quickly we can make things sound really good. That was kind of the fun ride for me.
Sam, do you want to talk about working with Mark? How long have you guys been working together?
This is our second show together, but Mark and I have worked together on and off for the last 4 or 5 years. Mark covered an episode with me of Mythic Quest. He's done an episode of What We Do in the Shadows together. So he and I kind of already knew going in that we had very similar work styles, kind of knew where we were going to land with the elements. So like where his dialogue was kind of going to sit. So I would make sure I would pre-dub backgrounds with that in mind. And then when we would come together, there'd be very little tweaking needed to make everything kind of mesh together, which was nice. It was nice to have that going in on a show with so much going on. One fun fact about the effects side, the dialogue side, Mark's session is pretty standardized. He has a pretty great template that he works with. I worked with the effects editors on this before we started to build a template that we could just kind of have throughout the season. We overbuilt it, thinking there's no way we're ever going to use all of these. So we had effects groups A through Z and 5 BG predubs and then 3 Foley predubs because we got the stuff from Randy and then a specific Foley predub of cut Foley, just things to top, things, sweeteners, this, that, the other thing. On episode 202, we used 25 of the effects predubs. People go, what? That's ridiculous. But we had a method to the madness. Every single predub was specific to an element. So guns, A and B, vehicles, A and B. So every time you would hear something, you wouldn't need to think about where it was. You're like, oh, okay, gun, go to predub G. It made it really fast to get through 900 tracks and be able to get to an element quickly, bring it to me on the console, and dial it back in before moving on. It was helpful also to have Mark there because if I had to go into the weeds to find something, he could continue rolling along on dialogue or music.
You know, Sam did not mix season 1. We had the excellent Kevin Roche. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the season, we had it down. You know, we won Emmys, and Craig was very, very happy with how season 1 turned out. So when Kevin wasn't available before we started season 2, finding another mixer to do the effects was kind of throwing Craig into a, little nervousness. But I had worked with Sam before, and he stepped in and just did an amazing job. So terrific. It was like nothing had changed. It was really, really good.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Sam, are the infected voices, is that dialogue or sound effects?
That is in sound effects.
Oh, really? I was expecting you to say the other way. Okay.
Yeah. So Kris Terhune, who handled the majority of the infected, would deliver us. We basically left 4 of those 26 predubs for him. And he would deliver 4 separate predubs of infected movement, infected vocal, effort, all of that sort of stuff. And he would source that from, I believe, some kits from Naughty Dog, from the developer of the game, and additional material recorded. And Michael, if I'm not mistaken, you guys did some sessions.
Season 1 and season 2, for the clickers, we brought in the 2 voice actors who had done the video game. We tried to use existing stuff, and it just didn't work for what we were doing at this point. So we brought in the actors and did a whole session just to create voices, emotions. Season 1, the bloater was in season 1, but he had a much bigger role in episode 2 in season 2. So we were trying to use with what we had, and it just wasn't quite working. So we ended up bringing the actor in who had done the video game many years ago, and he was terrific. And again, he was very into it, and Craig was very into it, and these recording sessions were kind of fun. They were just because we did all these different wacky voices and sounds, and then Kris Terhune would take that material and sit with Craig. Craig Mazin would go and literally sit with him sometimes on the weekends and just play and try to make these voices do what we needed them to do. So a lot of that was ADR stuff that we recorded. As I've said on a couple of the podcasts, Craig Mazin did a lot of voices in season 1, not as many in season 2. Let me try that. And he's very good at it. So it's kind of fun. We even opened up the mic and let him do a lot of voices on this. Not a lot, but some voices on the stage.
Rich, do you want to talk about, for prestige shows like this, with more standard dramas, there's a regular schedule. This episode arrives, you've got 2 weeks, it's mixing, then you move on. These series, one episode could take 2 weeks, and the next episode feels like it could take 6 weeks kind of thing. They vary a lot. How do you go about planning and allotting resources when the episodes can vary so much?
That's kind of always the challenge and the fun of supervising something is you sort of see it on paper. Like I read some scripts and you get an idea of what you think the sound design or sound challenges are going to be. And for me, at least, those are always not the thing that the design challenge is. Like, for instance, like I remember reading the script and they make a big thing of Oz's purple Maserati. And I was like, well, we're definitely going to want to record this car. And I gave Eric Potter a heads up at one point, like, hey, can you wrangle a Maserati, this and that. And then once we get the show, it's like, well, the Maserati is important, but it's not the thing. Larry would say, I think we would be better served if we allocated some of that recording budget towards additional editors. And that's what we ended up doing. And I think Larry was really, he's lightning fast and he's amazing at the actual content that he turns over to me. We both kind of figured out, okay, like, you're going to be tied up on 5 and 6, so we're going to have to bring in somebody like Diego to handle 8. And, you know, it was definitely always a little bit of a chess game. And I think the other funny thing for me, I think our first review on 101, there was like, I don't know, 20 people from HBO in a room. Matt Reeves is very involved, and he was, I think, a little nervous that we were not going to hit the mark that he wanted to make, which is a high one for the Batman kind of franchise. By episode 4, I think the HBO crowd was like 4 people. And then it sort of ramps back up at the end. The finale, it was like 15 HBO people. So it has kind of this curve. And honestly, this show is funny in the sense that, like, I didn't really know what the show was until it aired. Like, I watched it with my wife and she was like, that was great. And I was like, yeah, that was great. When we were in the weeds, it was just like, we got to make it sound good. I couldn't see the forest through the trees, essentially. So this show was kind of a wild ride in that sense, but it was super fun because I feel like, you know, Lauren was such a great leader in the sense that she really respected what we were doing. She was into it, and she had very clear, you know, directives on how to make the show that she wanted to make, which really helps the process because then it's just like you're in the room. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, you can, but Lauren always was like, no, this is what I want to do. And that really kind of helped us get to the finish line.
Working with Lauren was great. Some of that, you know, like her clear directives, I mean, obviously for Rich's, you know, from where Rich sits, it would be nice to know before we showed up on the stage, like what those directives were. So, you know, there was a bit of a, you know, like hurry up and like scramble situation a lot of times on the stage where, you know, it's like, oh, this is Lauren's idea. Let's do that. I mean, we even had some of the principal actors come in to the stage and do ADR sitting right next to me. I was just,
oh, right.
I'd hit record in Pro Tools and she's like, yeah, we need him to say this, this, and this. And, you know, none of that would be conveyed to like the ADR editor, like in a spotting session. So we really had to scramble on stage to make Lauren happy. But her ideas were great. And so sometimes in a mix, that can be a really annoying situation where you know, people come in and they're like, we don't know what this show is. We don't know what we're doing. We don't have any ideas. Can you help us out? Whereas I think for her, she needed to be in that environment to kind of get these ideas and then convey them to Rich and I so we could do what she wants. That can go south pretty quickly on a dub stage, but it worked really well on this show. And I don't recommend it as a method, but for our purposes, it was very satisfying at the end to basically just create something on the fly with the showrunner throwing out ideas and you just doing it right on the spot.
The energy that the showrunner brings to the room changes that so much. If they bring the energy of, let's figure out a way to make this better, this is going to be fun, then it can be fun. But if they bring an energy of, why isn't it like this?
Yeah.
Then everyone's stressed and it's the worst day of your life.
We're really blessed with Craig because, yeah, he's super demanding. And I always make a joke because when we're doing a playback, and we do a lot of playbacks on this show. I think out of 2 and 2, we do 4 or 5 playbacks. And every time you get a full set of notes, and it's like you never spotted it. The sound of a page turning on a legal pad, that sends my heart aflutter, not in a good way. I hear the first page turn and we're at 5 minutes. Like, yeah, you know. And but, you know, having a showrunner who is demanding but cares about sound is an amazing blessing. Because, yeah, things aren't always right, but you're never in trouble. You're going to get there. And that's the great attitude to have from a creative type.
So, Michael, just to follow up on the question I asked Rich about planning, scheduling, and figuring out, like, I would assume episode 1 of season 2 would have had a much shorter schedule on the mix stage than episode 2 of season 2, which was massive. Do you want to talk about how you figure out how long each episode needs?
Well, I mean, we had Alan Marshall Palmer was our post-supervisor, post-producer on season 2, and he was terrific and very thorough. So we did a lot of calendar meetings, planning, like, what can we do? We dubbed every single day for Sam. I don't remember, was it 6 months, 7 months? I can't,
Yeah, it was
five days a week.
big block.
And we would meet and make sure we could fill those days with something that needed to get done. So like on episode 2, where we had so many visual effects we were waiting on. I think we didn't even dub that, or didn't we do like 1, 3, 4? I'm getting the seasons confused, but
yeah, we dubbed out of order because the visual effects were just so intense, and so like it didn't make sense for us to dive into 2 until they were in a certain place. And of course, even once we got into 2, they continued changing and adding and updating. So yeah, we did like 1, 3, 4. Yeah, we were all over the. I think we had like 5 or at one point we're kind of like, where are we? We had no idea.
HBO has delivery dates that we have to meet, or try to meet. I think we got them, but it's one of those things. Okay, we can't worry about the last 3 episodes yet. We got to finish the first 4. That kind of situation.
So you guys would do it, just curious, you guys would do it in blocks, or you would roll out?
We tried to do the whole episode as best we could, but if we were waiting on a big chunk of an episode, like episode 2, then we would go on to episode 3, or then go on to episode 4 and try to wrap those up.
Okay.
I mean, there were always things to pick up because music changed. ADR, we can only get actors when we can get actors. So we knew we were lacking things that had to get put in. Yeah, and visual effects scenes.
Yeah, for episode 2, because there were sections that were just not ready yet and we needed to get going, we would pick sequences or whole scenes to sort of focus in on that were ready for us. So like at one point we had the first like 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of 2 ready to go. And then kind of as things became available, fill that out, then went back through the whole show, did a pass to make sure everything matched and felt cohesive. But yeah, there was really no other way to get through all of that if we just waited for the visual effects to be finished.
Do you guys prefer like mixing TV sequentially or in like one after another? I always kind of wonder how people approach things.
It's funny because I also came from the feature world. That's only my 4th year working in streaming or television, and I feel fortunate to have this opportunity because the material is so wonderful. In features, you would do a reel and you'd play that back and you'd sort of get that down before you go to the next reel. Now with television or streaming, we watch a whole episode several times, like 4 or 5 times. No, maybe not as many as 5, but maybe. And take notes and redo it again, and stuff. I don't know, Sam, what do you think as far as like what order do you prefer?
I mean, it's always nice to get to do a show in order because it's easier to track the story and kind of understand the reality of it and the necessity of what timelines are, what deadlines are. It's not unusual for us to be jumping around from episode to episode. I mean, and I've had that when I've done feature work, I've had the same thing. They're like, oh, this reel's not quite ready. So, do reel 1, then go to reel 3, and then back to 2. I feel like it is much nicer for the story flow to understand the arc of everything, doing it in order.
All the production sound mixers listening are like, yeah, do it in order. That's never happened for them.
I know.
Let's wrap this up with one last kind of quick question going around. Maybe your favorite sonic moment in the season that we just wrapped up here. Maybe Andy, do you want to go first on that? Hey everyone, I'm just going to jump in real quick here. Up until this point, we've been fairly spoiler-free in this episode, but for these last 10 minutes, there's going to be some spoilers. So if you haven't seen all the way through of season 2 of The Last of Us or the first season of The Penguin, you might want to stop here. But if you have, there's some great stories ahead, so keep listening.
I don't know if it's an easy one or a fun one, but there's a scene in the very last episode where young Oz is drowning his brothers in like the sewers underneath Gotham. And, Lauren, the showrunner, wanted these like sounds of, the kids like just utterly being like, tortured and in terror and like, just to make it as brutal as possible. There was some ADR that the kids did that it was okay. So we would pick little pieces of it, but then Rich and Larry pulled this one amazing drowning track that was in there that for whatever reason just made Lauren and I laugh so hard. And it made the scene so brutal. I question our sanity why we were laughing so hard at a scene where like two kids are getting drowned to death by their brother. It was pretty horrible. But I think because she wanted it so awful and we were able to figure out how to make it so awful that it was a bit satisfying at the end when we got to the finished product. And she was like, "This is great."
I have to admit, I wasn't laughing when I watched that scene.
I don't think most people would be, but when somebody tells you do the worst thing you've ever done in your whole career and you can pull it off, that's pretty satisfying.
Awesome. Rich?
Ooh. For me, and it's not like the most obvious, probably set piece sound wise, but it was just fun because it was one of those examples of everybody really firing on all cylinders in terms of like we were figuring out what we wanted to do in the moment. So the scene where, Andy, help me with Sophia's brother's name. Alberto
Falcone. Yeah.
Falcone. It's the scene where towards the end of the episode where Sophia is kind of interrogating Oz and they figure out this demented plan. So the car comes in off screen, it crashes into a fountain, and the horn goes off during the crash. And essentially, there's a really nice kind of, it was tricky to make that all work, and it took some time. But you hear the car crash off screen, and then Sophia walks up and figures out what's going on, and the horn is going off, and Lauren really wanted some kind of impressionistic sound design. So we kind of had to figure that out on the fly. And for most people watching it, they would probably assume that most of it is music, but a lot of it is kind of Larry and I doing some weird droney stuff. And it really hands off nicely to the music, to the score. Giacchino family did some amazing music on the show. I just really love that moment because I think it plays well, but it also was sort of put together on the spot with Larry cutting downstairs and Lauren reviewing off the stage and then, feeding the stage in the moment. So I just like that kind of moment because we didn't really know what we wanted to do. And I think it came together quite nicely. And all the different departments were really kind of serving the creative goal in that scene.
I really enjoy that scene because the first time I watched it, I didn't think about it at all. I was just in the plot. But when I rewatched it for this interview, when it cuts to the interior, you see a brick on the gas pedal, but nothing's hitting the horn.
Right.
But it still makes perfect sense. It worked really well. And then the horn dips down in volume, it comes back up, and then it kind of melds into this sound design. And then when that ends, the horn's gone, but you don't question it at all.
Here's some stupid inside baseball thing. First of all, Larry kept complaining. He was like, do you know how hard it is to make a crossfade on a horn sound? He couldn't get it. Like it would always, you would always hear the fade. He's like, man, it made me question everything I thought I knew because it's like, it shouldn't be that hard. So there was that bit, which was also punching. Remember, Andy? We couldn't punch it without hearing the brant, brant. So there was that bit. But then Matt Reeves had this, he was really adamant about us trying to do a thing where the horn fades out into music and then you cut back to Sophia and she's screaming. And Matt's big idea, which we kept trying to appease it, was once that cut to Sophia screaming, he wanted the horn to come out of her mouth, like really loud. So the horn goes away, fades out music, and then cut to Sophia, and then a really big burst of horn. And it was just, it was great because Lauren, we kept trying it. And Lauren was just like, eventually she was like, that is not working because it almost got a laugh. Like you didn't want that moment to be funny. So I think where we ended up was I think appropriate.
Michael, what's your favorite Sonic moment from season 2?
Well, I'm proud of a lot of the moments. I think the team did a great job, and it's always wonderful to be part of something that I think is so good. In episode 6, which is the flashback episode, which already is a very emotional episode because, our beloved Joel has been killed in episode 2. I guess I can say that now. He's back in all of 6 because it's all flashback. And there's a scene where he takes Bella to this old decrepit beat up, rundown space museum. And for her birthday, and she gets to sit in an actual space capsule. And, he found this recording from old times of, Cape Canaveral, whoever it was, Houston. She puts the headphones on, and, it's very unrealistic, but it's very cool. I mean, she's sitting in this space capsule, and we have all these great sounds of this capsule taking off. And then Mark Fishman, the original recording was pretty beat up of this guy's voice, doing the play-by-play of the space stuff. So Mark cleaned it all up pretty, and he did an amazing job of what he could do. And then we made it all dirty again for the show. I love it because you feel like you're in that capsule, and this little girl who hasn't lived in a world where you get these kind of treats very often. She does not go into Disneyland. She's not going to Magic Mountain. She gets to feel that, and you feel for her. And I think the sound really helps. I know Neil Druckmann because he directed that episode, and when he came for the playback, he took me aside and said, that scene is just, and he was kind of emotional. It blew me away, and it really, really sounded great. And I attribute that to, my editors and our terrific mixers here. So.
Mark Mangini was on the show once, and he said that he goes for the attaboys when someone comes up and pats him on the back and says that they really nailed it. That's a great attaboy story right there.
I was Mark's assistant and learned from Mark, so that's probably why I feel the same.
There you go. So. Sam, you get the final word. What's your favorite Sonic moment?
In episode 2, the scene at the end in the cabin when Joel and Abby are having their final encounter, so to speak.
I almost went there.
I love that scene because it gave us so much opportunity to play. And we spent a lot of time getting the room to feel cold and in the midst of a storm, but also not to a point where it was distracting. And if you listen to that scene, you hear like the window rattling, you hear the house shifting and creaking, you hear the footsteps moving things around in the space, you hear so much. And then at the actual moment when Abby gives the killing blow, we did a pass where there was a big boomy, whooshy sound design thing. And we were like, it's really cool, but it didn't feel quite right. And the picture editors were like, what if we pull it back? And where we ended up with just a single sound, everything going away, and it bleeding into the scream coming out of Ellie. That moment, still gave me the chills on the third or fourth playback of watching it. And I was really very happy with how all of that, despite it being a very devastating scene, came together.
Yeah, it's great. You guys did a great job.
Thanks a lot for talking with me today. This was really fun. This is the first time we've done a kind of format like this of getting two different shows together and talking it out. It was really wonderful to hear the different approaches and the different situations you were put in and how you overcame them. So thank you very much for sharing that with me today. It was great talking to you all.
Great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Timothy.
Wow, that was a really great talk about the sound work on two really great shows. Congrats to them all on their Emmy nominations. I have a bunch of really wonderful episodes coming out in the near future, so please keep checking in. We'll talk to you soon. Sound Idea's highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiances. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Idea's proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.